Welcome to my channel. Here we discuss things that are actually worth discussing, stories that speak on their own. And if that speaks to you, consider subscribing if you haven't already. Some days pass by quietly, barely remembered. Others divide your life into two parts, before and after. For John Walsh, the day that changed everything wasn't just a day. It was a rupture, a wound that would never fully close. And yet, from that wound came one of the most powerful stories of grief turned into justice the world has ever seen. Before the unthinkable, John Walsh was not always a crusader for justice. He wasn't a law enforcement official or a politician or a media figure. He was a hotel developer, a businessman, a father. He lived in Hollywood, Florida, a peaceful suburban community where families rode bikes after dinner, kids played in the yard until the streetlights came on, and people left their doors unlocked. He had a wife, Reve, and together they were raising their only child, a bright, artistic, endlessly curious boy named Adam. Adam was the kind of kid who lit up a room. He loved Star Wars. He was gentle, thoughtful, and full of questions. His parents often joked that Adam wasn't just their son, he was their heart, walking around outside their body. Their lives were like millions of others. There were birthday parties, school field trips, swimming lessons, and nights spent reading books under the covers. No one ever thinks this will happen to them, until it does. July 27, 1981. It was a summer afternoon, hot, ordinary, forgettable in every way. Until it wasn't. John was at work. Reve had errands to run. She and Adam drove to the Sears at Hollywood Mall, just a few miles from home. Inside the store, Adam spotted a small group of boys huddled around an Atari video game console, set up for customers to try. Like most kids, he was fascinated. Reve told him to stay there while she went to look at a lamp nearby, less than 75 feet away. It was the kind of trust parents place in their children all the time. But something happened, something that would never be fully explained. When Reve returned, just minutes later, Adam was gone. At first, she thought maybe he wandered off. Maybe he'd found a toy aisle or gone looking for her. She searched, asked employees. No one had seen anything. No one had paid attention. There was no emergency alert, no immediate lockdown, no surveillance system to review, no coordinated response. Adam was simply gone. The search. What followed was a parent's nightmare, played out in slow motion. The police were called, but the investigation was delayed and disjointed. There was no federal missing child database in 1981, no standardized alert system, and a troubling cultural assumption that most missing children were runaways, not victims. John and Reve pleaded for help, put up flyers, and spoke to the press. For 2 long weeks, they lived in a limbo that defies description, suspended between hope and horror. Then, on August 10, 1981, the news came. 2 fishermen in Vero Beach, nearly 120 miles away, discovered a severed head in a drainage canal. Dental records confirmed what John and Reve already knew in their bones. It was Adam. He was 6 years old. The rest of his body was never found. The aftermath. Most people would have collapsed under the weight of such a loss, and for a time, the Walsh family did. Their home, once filled with laughter, became a shrine of silence. They mourned not just their child, but the innocence of their world. What had once been safe and ordinary had been ripped away. But grief, when it burns hot enough, can either destroy you or forge something new. For John, it lit a fire that would never go out. Turning grief into action. John Walsh made a decision. If the system had failed Adam, it would not fail others. If law enforcement didn't know how to respond, he would teach them. If society wasn't paying attention, he would make them listen. He and Reve threw themselves into advocacy. They testified before Congress. They met with police departments, journalists, and lawmakers. They shared their pain not to gain sympathy, but to demand change. And slowly, they got it. The birth of a movement. In 1984, just 3 years after Adam's murder, John and Reve co-founded the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It was revolutionary. For the first time in American history, there was a centralized clearinghouse for missing child cases, a 24-hour hotline, a way to link law enforcement agencies across state lines, a way to alert the public, a way to fight back. The NCMEC helped bring about tangible changes in how missing child cases were handled, from the creation of missing posters to the appearance of children's photos on milk cartons. These weren't symbolic gestures, they saved lives. But for John, it still wasn't enough. America's Most Wanted. In 1988, he took his fight to a new frontier, television. John Walsh launched America's Most Wanted, a weekly series that profiled fugitives and cold cases. It gave faces and names to criminals who had slipped through the cracks. But more importantly, it empowered the public to help. Each week, viewers tuned in not just to be informed, but to be part of something bigger. Tips poured in, leads emerged, arrests were made. By the time the original series ended, America's Most Wanted had led to the capture of over 1,200 fugitives and the safe recovery of dozens of missing children. It was one of the longest-running crime series in American history. John Walsh had become more than a father seeking justice. He had become a symbol of it. The legacy of Adam. In 2006, 25 years after Adam's murder, the U.S. Congress passed the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act, signed into law by President George W. Bush. The law created a national sex offender registry. It strengthened penalties for crimes against children. It ensured that dangerous predators couldn't simply cross state lines and disappear into the shadows. John stood beside the president that day, holding a photo of his son. And though his eyes were heavy with sorrow, they also carried something else, pride. Because Adam hadn't died for nothing. His name now lived in a law that would protect countless other children. The man behind the mission. For all his public victories, John Walsh never let the world forget that he was a father first. He never stopped visiting Adam's grave. He never stopped grieving. He once said, "You never get over it, you just get through it." That honesty, the refusal to pretend that justice erased the pain, was what made him so relatable. He never pretended to be a hero. He was a man carrying the weight of unspeakable loss, doing whatever he could to make sure no other parent had to carry it too. A nation forever changed. Today, the systems we take for granted, the Amber Alert, child safety databases, predator registries, rapid response teams, all exist in large part because of what happened to Adam Walsh and what his father did in response. We are safer not because the world has changed, but because people like John Walsh refused to accept it as it was. He showed us what it means to transform personal tragedy into public purpose. He turned his family's darkest day into a beacon that has saved countless lives. He turned one life lost into millions saved. That's the legacy of John Walsh. That's the power of a single day. The day that changed everything.